Angela McArdle is the chair of the Libertarian Party. Now, she attracted both praise and also some criticism months ago when she invited former President Donald Trump to attend the Libertarian National Convention and make a pitch to libertarians for their vote. McArdle thinks that gambit paid off and that Donald Trump made promises to libertarian voters, like appointing a libertarian to his cabinet and freeing Ross Ulbricht, someone libertarians believe was unjustly sentenced to life in prison. But others say that cozying up to Trump has come at a cost. The Libertarian Party, after all, has its own candidate, Chase Oliver. While we haven't finished counting all the votes, it does look like Oliver has underperformed recent LP candidates. Now, Oliver told Reason Magazine, where I also work, that, quote, "I think we did the best we could, considering that there's been a lot of headwinds in this campaign. First and foremost, the two-party system, always trying to relegate alternative parties' voices, and also, he said, internal disputes within the party led to a less than full-throated support from national leadership." But is this outcome worth it if it means that Trump is listening to libertarians? Is Trump listening to libertarians? To discuss all this and more, I am joined by Angela McArdle. So happy to have you on Rising to discuss all of this.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the Trump cabinet administration picks we're seeing right now. Obviously, this is happening like in real time. I didn't even see that, Kristi Noem got picked for Homeland Security. To me, that's a kind of neutral, might be fine. I did appreciate how she ran her state during COVID. She was more skeptical than others about some of the mandates that could be encouraging from a civil liberties standpoint, I think, if she got into the administration. Then you have someone like Marco Rubio now being discussed, not confirmed as of this moment, but very much sounds like might be the choice for State Department. Elise Stefanik, UN ambassador. These are, in my view, and tell me what yours is, more neoconservative leaning voices, the exact kind of people that libertarians were hoping would not be part of the next administration. So how are you processing all this? Where's your thinking at?
I think we're going to see a more libertarian slant on domestic policy, but I never had high hopes for libertarian foreign policy this term. I'm hopeful that it won't get any worse. I think that Donald Trump is proud of the fact that he didn't start any new wars. So I think that's probably his goal this term. Libertarians should sort of adjust the bar as we're sort of riding this high of seeing Elon Musk come in and talk about shredding the federal government. I think that Donald Trump is going to try to negotiate peace with Russia, do something to de-escalate the conflicts in the Middle East. But I never thought that we were going to come in and have a purely libertarian administration. I think that people got maybe their hopes kind of set at the wrong metric.
Yeah, I never got my hopes up. My expectations were probably even lower than yours because I know that Trump is not a particularly ideological figure and has mostly made personnel choices in the past about who looks good to him on TV, who's a fighter, who he thinks is doing a good rhetorical job of backing him up. Now, he has sometimes listened to non-interventionist voices, and that's been good. I personally would like if he's listening to people who think the education department can go and all that, involving someone like... let's talk about the explicit promises that you thought you got out of him after the Libertarian Convention appearance. My understanding is that's pardoning or freeing or whatever Ross Ulbricht, who, if most of our viewers probably know who that is, but was a libertarian-aligned person who got sentenced to life in prison for running a platform, Silk Road, that made possible all sorts of transactions, including illegal transactions, but he wasn't the one involved in that. He was just the innovator on behalf of the platform, and he got charged, we would argue, very unjustly, and it's been a major libertarian issue to get him released. Trump didn't do it during the first term, could have but didn't. So I've been skeptical that he's going to do it during the second term, but that's one of the things he said to you he would do, and then also add a libertarian to the cabinet. Am I missing anything?
I mean, those are the big ones, right? It's free Ross Ulbricht, abolish the Department of Education, and put a libertarian in the cabinet. Those are the things that I'm focused on and trying to make sure that they happen, white knuckling it through the rest of it while everybody's losing their minds on the internet over Marco Rubio, who thankfully is not, he's not appointed yet. So there's still a little hope there. I do think he's going to free Ross Ulbricht. I don't know that Ross is going to literally walk out of prison on day one. I think there's still time that has to transpire in order for him to be processed and so on and so forth. But, I've arranged meetings between President Trump and, members of the Ulbricht family. It's it seems like it's actually going to happen. And he has made comments about it, not just, privately to me and publicly to the convention, but, at the Bitcoin conference to other people that we know. He's got all the clemency paperwork and all of that already squared away, at least, the packages and things that have been worked up so far. So I think it looks very realistic that it's going to happen and that Ross will be out in less than 30 days, including the time it takes to actually accomplish that, which I don't know. I don't know how much time it takes to get the paperwork over and process someone out of a prison, but
Yeah,
but I'm very optimistic on that.
if it's day one or day 30, we can take the win on that. I agree
Yeah.
with you there. So I very much hope we see that. On the cabinet appointments, if we got like Massey in charge of agriculture, Rand Paul in charge of that would be phenomenal. That would be such a
Yep.
success, I think, from the libertarian point of view. I guess my to give voice to the fear, or libertarians, I know some of them who are skeptical of the approach you've taken. If it's just some minor official in some minor government post, or if it's even like RFK Jr., who is right now very proximate to Trump and whom I
Hmm.
agree with on some things, and I'm glad has shined a light on free speech violations and some COVID overreach, but also has a long history of supporting environmental
Sure.
regulation and health regulation in ways that are not libertarian. So paradoxically, if like the libertarian choice is him for a role in which he does not align with libertarianism, we can't call that a win, right?
No, and I mean, Donald Trump has made some joking comments about how he's not putting Kennedy anywhere near oil, near our liquid gold. So I think that he's mindful of that, and I think, Elon Musk is sort of balancing that out. I am optimistic about seeing a massive deregulation across the country, which is really going to help job growth. And it's one of the less sexy libertarian talking points, but it is very libertarian. I imagine that we're going to get a libertarian like in the Department of Education, which is a very like almost impossible to screw it up place. Just get rid of it. Just kill as much of it as you can. I don't think we're gonna get anything like Secretary of State or something big like that. But whatever we give, I'm just gonna be grateful. It's a foot in the door. We have to remember to have long-term vision on this. It doesn't matter if it's something fairly innocuous, if it's not like the biggest prize, it's a foot in the door. The neocons used to be like a joke fringe think tank in DC, and now they control everything. It's because they got a foot in the door through William F. Buckley and probably the CIA. But I think we can do the same. We can start wedging our way in. If other people in the GOP will kick out a lot of the deep state people, then we'll be able to make some more advancements.
Will, you and I are going to continue talking about this long-term strategy and also what it means for the Libertarian Party. We're going to stay tuned for this weekend. The rest of my interview with Angela McArdle will be available. I'm back with Angela McArdle to talk about libertarians influencing Donald Trump, what this means for his administration, and then also what it means for the Libertarian Party. And I want to pick up there because obviously libertarians have their own party. I, in full disclosure, voted for the Libertarian ticket this time, last time, the time before. I don't think I've ever voted for a non-libertarian. Chase Oliver's performance was a little underwhelming, even compared to Joe Jorgensen, the previous candidate's performance, which was during the COVID cycle. And I think it is not a secret to say you and Chase Oliver have sometimes had a combative relationship. I've seen it on social media. There's been disagreements or reservations expressed mutually between Libertarian Party leadership and the candidate who won the nominating process. What is your perspective on the Libertarian Party running their own candidate? Because I think a lot of people, even in my orbit, libertarians I'm friends with, would say, well, it's all well and good to influence the Republican Party. I hope we get more of it. I hope Trump nominates more libertarians, and I hope you have exactly the influence you're talking about. But at the same time, we're libertarian voters for a reason, because we think the two-party system is bad. We wanted to build up some alternative. So do we risk hollowing out something that even as much of the percentage of the vote that Jorgensen and Gary Johnson were getting, those were hard-fought accomplishments, and do we run the risk of kind of losing some of that as you go about this strategy? Do you hear that?
Well, Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot to consider here. The party wasn't founded to just get people elected into office. David Nolan was really clear about it. There's all kinds of quotes you can find on him really criticizing the ballot axe hamster wheel, the focus on getting people elected over the focus on spreading libertarianism. The Libertarian Party is one tool of many that libertarians can use. And I think that this election was really a referendum on wokeism, and our candidate should have been talking about things like unifying against the regime. Team unity was a big deal. I held a whole event on it called Rescue the Republic, rejecting identity politics instead of leaning into it, running a referendum on wokeism, leaning hard into medical freedom and health, calling out America's involvement in unjust wars, especially what's happening in Israel, taking a hardline stance against the Democratic Party, which is not the Democratic Party that it was 14, 16 years ago. And that's not what libertarians perceived our presidential candidate as doing. And I think that the results speak for themselves.
I want to pick up on that because I know exactly what you're talking about. Many libertarian identifying people criticize the candidate, Chase Oliver. Again, a perception that he was not talking about all those things. I don't want to speak for him. He's not here, but we did interview him on Rising many times. Reason interviewed him. I did not actually pick up on him. I realized that he came from a left background,
Yeah.
and previously had some stances, including relating to COVID, that at the time were not as libertarian as they ought to be. He didn't say anything while running that I perceived to be not libertarian. Am I wrong about it? He said there should be, on the medical freedom front, right? He said there should be no mandates of any sort. He strongly denounced war and on foreign policy. I think it was rock solid. So that is it. Then it's just like a cultural association with woke. It's because he's gay. I don't know. Like, what is it that caused
No,
people to
it's
say
not.
he's woke? He's
It's
not
not
saying
because
he's
he's
woke.
gay. There have been some really vocal, outspoken, and courageous gay people in the Libertarian Party, in the GOP as well. Um, did he say anything that was particularly courageous and really blew your mind and you were like, "Wow, that's true leadership?" Because that is a significant part of this. Failure to show moral courage or tap into the cultural zeitgeist is something that will kill your campaign. He ran an internal party campaign. He ran to signal to woke libertarians. No one outside of our ecosystem cares about that. It has no popular appeal. It stands for nothing. It sounds like corporate libertarianism. It's not courageous to walk around with a rainbow flag anymore, which, like campaigning just at pride events is wholly unpalatable to the millions of people across the country who've been radicalized over the last 4 years and feel aggrieved by all of their rights being trampled on by inflation and all those things. You have to speak to the issues that people are passionate about right now. That's not what happened, unfortunately. I hope this is a learning lesson for everyone else. It's a small group of libertarians who made the decision to make Chase Oliver our presidential candidate. I, by the way, could have pulled him off and put Kennedy on. And so I used restraint there for everybody who's like, "Oh, Angela's so hard on Chase." Like, I let it happen. And there are a lot of people who are angry about that too. But we need to learn from this moment in history.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna push back one more time and get your
Yeah.
response to that. In terms of campaigning at a pride event or waving a rainbow flag, like, is that, again, if it was accompanied by a kind of statement that, like, I think there should be more discrimination laws, or I think the cake baker should have to bake the cake, then I would agree with you wholeheartedly. That's not even libertarianism. That's just wokeness, and I'm totally against it. But actually didn't hear him take a position on wokeness that was like somehow bad to liberty, because as wokeness is and I agree with you on tapping into the cultural vibes, but like what the government policy should be with respect to some of these things is not. I mean, there is not a component, right, for government policy. It's a cultural battle. I don't want the government to force people to be not woke or something. I'm sure you don't either. So if it's just like with his campaign tactics or the optics of talking
Yeah.
to people who are maybe woke. I mean, I would hope that libertarians bring arguments to liberals along one line and one axis, and then bring arguments to conservatives along different lines, and that there's room for both of those things to happen. So to some degree, it sounds to me like the libertarians you're talking about who are critical of this strategy were mad about outreach the other direction. I would think we should do outreach in every direction, just like I defend you and have defended you for some of the outreach that you've done to Republicans and to Trump. I think that's absolutely fine. But then it's if your people get mad about it when they do it, and they get mad about it when, do you see how I just want peace and the promotion of libertarianism, and some of this fighting seems very self-destructive and among a small group of people who everyone will be taken less seriously because of it. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that screaming voting and gender are non-binary when you wear a rainbow cape is probably not productive. I think that almost every libertarian affiliate across the country has done events at pride parades. That's not the issue. It's when almost the entirety of your outreach is to that demographic, to a demographic that is not interested in libertarianism and the cultural zeitgeist. That's the issue. And I would greatly distinguish between gay people and pride parade culture. I think the two are very different at this day and time. We want people to hear our message, and we want people to be receptive to our message and to be talking about it afterwards. And so one of the most common sense things is to deliver that message to people who are hungry for it and who already feel radicalized and awake against the government, the regime, not just people who are like, oh, well, that's nice, like you have to use wisdom and discernment when you're doing outreach, and we didn't see that.
So you were reelected chair of the Libertarian Party. Can you talk about what the next cycle would be like? Is this the strategy you've kind of employed specifically because you didn't like necessarily the choices the candidate was going to make? If the candidate was someone more in line with your ideal libertarian candidate, does then the game change? Like if that were to happen next time, then you would advocate maybe more combativeness or that registering more libertarian voters is the important thing to do, or actually upping the total votes we're going to get? Does it have to do with the candidate, or is this kind of a long-term pivot to say, to make noise as a libertarian party and then compromise with whichever major party ticket is going to promise to do some actually libertarian things?
Well, I think it's very important to have registered libertarian voters across the country. I've never disputed that. At the national level, though, that's not something I necessarily get to control. That's what the states handle. And, I think that Chase Oliver, in spite of his low vote turnout and my disagreements with his campaign, I think he did a fantastic job of pulling from Kamala and not pulling from Trump. And if Vivek Ramaswamy, or, we'll see what happens with JD Vance if he moves in a libertarian direction. If one of them runs for president in the next election cycle, I am happy to run another Chase Oliver campaign. Anyone like Chase Oliver. I am happy to pull from Democrats and to do our job in order to make the country more libertarian. If they run someone like Mitt Romney, though, I am much more likely to run a Dave Smith or someone like that and to really wreck their election. And I think that that's a fantastic policy, and that we should certainly continue to run a serious down-ticket libertarian candidates. And if we get someone in the administration, we'll be running competitive federal races in like 8 to 12 years. I'm very excited about all of that.
I hear you on Vivek because I do think he engages with libertarians. He's talked about libertarian nationalism being the future, not NatCon nationalism. JD Vance would have to move dramatically more in the direction of libertarianism for me. He has been he's been openly hostile to our views in the past.
But also he's coming around, he said he was interested in what Ron Paul had said about ending the Federal Reserve. He's someone who is young and open to hearing new ideas, and that's a really good thing, and he seems to be surrounding himself with better people. You have to allow people to have a redemption arc. So I'm excited to see what comes of some of these younger America First people, boomer generation, let's see if we can get some young conservatives who are open to libertarian ideas in positions of power and influence.
Angela McArdle, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.